This is CNN Breaking News.
Welcome to our viewers here in the United States and around the world.
What the hell is that sound?
Situation Room with breaking news.
Is that my roof?
President Biden is suggesting U.S. troops may stay in Afghanistan until all Americans are out of the country, even if it's past the
What the
August
hell that was?
31st deadline for withdrawal. The president speaking out in a new interview, claiming there was no way for U.S. troops to leave the country without chaos ensuing. And he's standing by his departing defense of the operation, denying it could have been handled better, insisting, and I'm quoting him now, "I don't think it was a failure." This, as the Taliban is now using gunfire and whips to block potential evacuees from reaching the Kabul airport. The Pentagon is acknowledging security has rapidly degraded, but America's top general insists nothing indicated the country would collapse in only 11 days. Our correspondents are standing by in Afghanistan, here in the United States. First, let's go to our Chief National Affairs Correspondent, Jeff Zeleny. He's over at the White House. Jeff, first of all, tell us about this new Biden interview. What is the president saying?
Well, President Biden is saying for the first time that he is going to be slightly flexible on that August 31st self-imposed deadline if all Americans are not evacuated from Afghanistan. But he was less clear what the time frame would be for those Afghan nationals, all of the Afghanistan citizens who helped the U.S. forces over the last 20 years or so. He made these comments in a new interview with George Stephanopoulos of ABC News, the first time the president has really gone deep into the Afghanistan situation since the Taliban takeover. Let's watch.
All troops are supposed to be out by August 31st. Even if Americans and our Afghan allies are still trying to get out, they're going to leave?
We're going to do everything in our power to get all Americans out and our allies.
Does that mean troops will stay beyond August 31st if necessary?
Depends on where we are and whether we can ramp these numbers up to 5,000 to 7,000 a day coming out. If that's the case, they'll all be out.
Because we've got like 10 to 15,000 Americans in the country right now, right? And are you committed to making sure that the troops stay until every American who wants to be out
Yes.
is out?
Yes.
How about our Afghan allies? We have about 80,000.
Well, that's not.
Is that too high?
That's too high.
How
The
many?
estimate we're giving is somewhere between 50 and 65,000 folks, total, counting their families.
Does the commitment hold for them as well?
The commitment holds to get everyone out, that in fact we can get out and everyone should come out. And that's the objective. That's what we're doing now. That's the path we're on. I think we'll get
So Americans should understand the troops might have to be there beyond August 31st.
No, Americans should understand that we're going to try to get it done before August 31st.
But if we don't, the troops will
If we
stay.
don't, we'll determine at the time who's left. And if there are American forces, if there's American citizens left, we're going to stay till we get them all out.
So, of course, one central question hanging over all of this
I could never get interviewed like that. Passive aggressively. And go fuck yourself. Jesus. Tough
chaos
job.
that we've all seen unfold this week in Afghanistan was actually inevitable.
When you look at what's happened over the last week, was it a failure of intelligence, planning, execution, or judgment?
Look, I don't think it was a fair. Look, it was a simple choice, George. When the Taliban, let me back and put it another way. When you had the government of Afghanistan, the leader of that government, getting in a plane and taking off and going to another country, when you saw the significant collapse of the Afghan troops we had trained, up to 300,000 of them, just leaving their equipment and taking off. That was, that's what happened. That's simply what happened.
But we've all seen the pictures. We've seen those hundreds of people packed into a C-17. We've seen Afghans
That
falling.
was 4 days ago, 5 days ago.
What did you think when you first saw those pictures?
What I thought was we have to gain control of this. We have to move this more quickly. We have to move in a way in which we can take control of that airport. And we did.
So you don't think this could have been handled, this actually could have been handled better in any way? No mistakes?
No, I don't think it could have been handled in a way that we're going to go back in hindsight and look, but the idea that somehow there's a way to have gotten out without chaos ensuing, I don't know how that happens. I don't know how that happened.
So for you, that was always priced into the decision?
Yes.
But Wolf, that stands in stark contrast to what President Biden said with his own words just a month ago here at the White House, when he talked about the reasoning and the timeline for withdrawing troops from Afghanistan. So those words said here this afternoon must be viewed through the lens of what the president said on July 8th, when he said that safety and security would happen in Afghanistan. Let's watch those comments.
The military mission in Afghanistan will conclude on August 31st. The drawdown is proceeding in a secure and orderly way, prioritizing the safety of our troops as they depart. The likelihood there's going to be the Taliban overrunning everything and owning the whole country is highly unlikely.
So the bottom line here, Wolf, is framed in both of those conversations, both of those sentiments from the president. That is what Democrats on Capitol Hill want to get to the bottom of. What happened? How was this administration caught so blindsided and flat-footed by the rise of the Taliban? It also has led to really an extraordinary questions of competence and credibility of this administration's foreign policy. Of course, this president is someone who ran on his foreign policy strength, his relationships with allies. All of those have been put in question because of the crisis in Afghanistan. But again, we did not see President Biden give an inch on that today, saying in his words, it was not a failure.
Yeah, his precise words indeed. I don't think it was a failure. Jeff Zeleny, I want you to stand by. Right now I want to go live to Afghanistan. Our chief international correspondent, Clarissa Ward, who's doing an amazing job for us, continues to report on what's happening on the ground in Kabul. Clarissa, you're there in Kabul. First of all, what's your reaction to what we just heard from the President of the United States?
Well, I think my reaction is less important than what I would imagine the reaction will be of many Afghan people, which is, if this isn't a failure, then what is? Because the scenes that we have been seeing throughout the day, the desperation, the complete chaos, shots being fired, tear gas, the nightmare that has become many Afghan people's living reality is ongoing, and there isn't an end in sight. I do think that Afghan people will also latch on to that sort of glimmer of a commitment that we heard there, that I believe he said 50 to 60,000 was the total that he thought of Afghan nationals who've worked closely with the U.S., that there was a commitment to ensure that they would be safely taken or given safe passage out of the country. But again, there's still so many questions as to how that happens and what's the timeline. You heard him say very clearly that U.S. troops might stay a bit longer if all the Americans in this country haven't left yet, but didn't really explain what happens to those tens of thousands of Afghans who are basically now camped outside the airport waiting for some clarity on their situation, Wolf.
You know, it's amazing what's going on right now, and we're obviously hearing the president speak about it in this unique way. You're there on the streets, right near the airport, and you were there earlier in the day. You were met by menacing Taliban fighters. It was a really scary moment. You were seeing fear and chaos and violence firsthand. Tell our viewers about that.
Well, the irony is the U.S. had first said that there would be safe passage to the airport. Okay, that clearly hasn't happened. And today, when we went to the airport, there were far fewer people than there had been in previous days. So you can imagine how chaotic it was in the days running up to today. But still, you have this insane situation where the U.S. are controlling the perimeter of the airport. They've been firing out shots. They've been firing out tear gas to try to push back the crowds. And then you have the Taliban who are managing sort of checkpoints around the airport. And let me tell you, Wolf, their methods of crowd control are downright scary. And so for any ordinary Afghan, frankly, any ordinary person from any country, you really are faced with a very dicey and intimidating situation to try to get into that airport. And we went there to try to give our audience a sense of what it looks like. America's last foothold in Afghanistan is now guarded by the Taliban.
You see the Taliban all over. They don't allow anyone.
We've come to Kabul's airport to see the gauntlet people must pass through to fly out.
we are accosted by an angry Taliban fighter.
Can I ask you a question? Excuse me?
He says first.
Cover my face? Okay. Cover my face. What is this? What is that? He told me to cover my face, but he doesn't want to comment on that truncheon he's carrying.
The fighter tells us these chaotic scenes are the fault of America. The cause of all this is America in Afghanistan. Look at these people, he says. America's really acting unfairly towards them. Why are they lying and telling them that they can go to America? Why don't they let them stay and help their country?
Okay. Doesn't want to talk to you. Okay. Doesn't want to talk to you. That's fine.
We keep walking to avoid confrontation. A man follows us, asking for advice.
How he can enter the base?
How you can enter the base?
Yes. Because they will send me email also.
Do you have paperwork to enter?
Yes.
Show
The
me.
enter no. But we have email and they call me.
Was this an Italian company?
Yeah, Italian company. Era.
Okay, I don't want this guy to whip you.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Others crowd around us to show their documents.
Cam Phoenix. You want to
It's my HR letter.
Yeah. You're a translator?
Holy fucking eyeballs.
Yes. Camp Invicta. So they're saying they all worked at American camps as translators for the Americans, and they can't get into that airport. These Taliban fighters are a little upset with us.
We decide to leave and head for our car. The fighter takes the safety off his AK-47 and pushes through the crowd.
Stay behind him. Stay behind him.
You can see that some of these Taliban fighters, they're just pumped up on adrenaline, or I don't know what. It's a very dicey situation. Suddenly, two other Taliban charge towards us. You can see their rifle butt raised to strike producer Brent Swales. When the fighters are told we have permission to report, they lower their weapons and let us pass.
Okay, now we're going. Get in the car.
And Wolf, I do want to say that while the scenes at the airport have been very chaotic and very disturbing, as you saw there, the rest of the city is surprisingly calm. The Taliban understands that the world's watching. They want to get this right. They want to provide law and order. And so we definitely saw a lot of cars on the street, a lot of shops open, a semblance of normalcy returning to life. But that, of course, is all in jeopardy, essentially, by what's happening at the airport, because it is so tense and just like a powder keg that could blow up at any moment if the situation devolves any further, Wolf.
Certainly could. Clarissa, I want you to stand by. I want to get back to you in just a moment, but right now I want to go to our Pentagon correspondent, Barbara Starr. She's getting news. Barbara, the U.S. military alluded to staying past the August 31st deadline, but has not said that outright, unlike the President of the United States, who just suggested, if necessary, the U.S. troops will remain on the ground beyond the end of this month, which has been the deadline. Is that correct?
Absolutely correct, Wolf. According to President Biden, this appears to be very much under discussion. Now, in the 3 o'clock hour, we had a press conference with Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. General Mark Milley, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. General Milley talked about getting every American out of Afghanistan who wants to leave. And that is a check we don't know that they can cash, to use an expression. There are Americans in Kabul who cannot get to the airport. Even though the Pentagon says the Taliban are letting them through the checkpoints, there are Americans around the country who may not be able to get on the roads and get past checkpoints out in the rural areas to even get to the capital city. But it looks at this point like that may be part of the reason General Milley put that out on the table earlier today here at the Pentagon. President Biden also endorsing that idea. They are going to have to get Taliban permission, acquiescence, not very clear, how the Taliban would react to this. We know that military leaders in Afghanistan are talking to the Taliban. We're told that the talks are about deconfliction, Pentagon jargon that can mean a whole lot of things, but basically trying to sort out who does what and reduce the violence and let people through. Negotiations with the Taliban, that in itself is remarkable, but they will have to come to some agreement if U.S. troops are to stay and the Taliban promise not to challenge them, and you believe Taliban promises, Wolf.
You know, it's interesting, Barbara, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, for all practical purposes, acknowledging there was a major intelligence blunder, that the U.S. military was caught completely off guard by the speed at which the entire country of Afghanistan, the military, the political leadership, simply collapsed. Tell us about it.
It was a remarkable moment from General Milley, very candid, that they had a lot of intelligence scenarios, they had a lot of ideas about what could happen, but this was not one of them. Listen to what he had to say.
The time frame of a rapid collapse, that was widely estimated. It ranged from weeks to months and even years following our departure. There was nothing that I or anyone else saw that indicated a collapse of this army and this government in 11 days.
So you can bet there are going to be months, if not years, of questions to the military leadership, to the Pentagon, about how they missed all of this and how on earth it could have happened with nobody noticing.
As I say, a major U.S. intelligence blunder. Barbara Starr at the Pentagon, thank you very much. Let's bring back Larissa Ward. She's on the scene for us in Kabul, along with our chief political correspondent, Dana Bash, is with us, retired Major General, CNN military analyst Spider Marks, and our national security analyst, Peter Bergen, is with us. He's the author, by the way, of an important brand new book, The Rise and Fall of Osama bin Laden. Dana, President Biden seemed to try and argue this wasn't a failure before taking a second stab at the question, but he's still arguing this chaos was unavoidable. What's your reaction when you heard that?
It's a different point of view and a different message than the one we heard from him just a day and a half ago, which was much more, to borrow a term, straight talk, much more making the point that he promised that he would level with the American people and that this happened more quickly than anybody thought. That's certainly what General Milley said earlier today. But how can you say this happened more quickly than people thought, and then say I don't have any regrets and this was unavoidable? The two kind of contradict one another. And the fact is, as Barbara said, this is going to be looked at for weeks, months, years as to what actually went wrong. But a lot went wrong. And just looking at the pictures and seeing what's happening and seeing the look on the face of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, that in and of itself speaks 1,000 words. And so he came across as a bit more defensive than I would have thought, given how we saw him sort of try to guide the country just a couple of days ago.
The Taliban has taken control of the entire country. The military fell apart. Political leadership escaped in only 11 days. That sounds like a total failure to me. General Marks, the president is now admitting the U.S. withdrawal deadline could slide if they can't evacuate all Americans by August 31st. So this deadline is apparently no longer a real deadline, is it?
I think it's fair to say that when the president said that everybody would be out, or at least the operation would be terminated by 8/31, that was arbitrary. And now what the president has done is wisely establish some conditions, right? This was not conditions-based initially. This was a hard date, and the United States was going to be gone, at least wrap up an operation and be gone by the 31st. He has now stated quite frankly, we have a mission to accomplish. We have some priorities for departures. We're going to address each one of those priorities, and if we're not complete by a date certain, we're going to push that date out. So I think that's a good thing. It certainly allows the planners, and we know that any plan, once it reaches contact with the enemy or the conditions, it's going to change. This is a changing plan, and that's a good thing.
You know, Peter, does it raise red flags, and you've studied Afghanistan now for decades, does it raise red flags to hear that the United States is now dependent on the Taliban to evacuate people safely?
Well, I mean, the Taliban, they don't want to complicate the fact that they just took power, so I'm sure they don't antagonize us. But I do want to address something that came up in the Milley conversation, which is the oldest trick in the Washington, D.C. playbook is to dress up a policy failure as an intelligence failure. In fact, the intelligence, as reported by Barbara Starr, was the Taliban could fall 30 to 90 days, and that was about 2 weeks ago, I would say. That intelligence assessment wasn't completely off. And really, the big problem was we announced we were leaving in April, the Biden administration, and then again in July, and the Taliban understand the media, and they had a plan. And so I think to kind of blame the intelligence community for a policy failure is a fairly typical Washington play, but not actually what happened here.
You know, Clarissa, you're there in Afghanistan. We're already seeing signs the Taliban is cracking down big time on protesters, not only around the airport, but elsewhere. Do you expect this new regime to show a more brutal side as the U.S. evacuation continues, and God only knows what's going to happen after the U.S. evacuation is complete?
I think it's pretty inevitable, Wolf, that we're going to see a sort of tightening of controls. You mentioned today at that protest in Jalalabad, a bunch of people took to the streets. They pulled down a Taliban flag. They put up the Afghan flag. Taliban fighters then started firing on the crowd. And that's probably just a taste of what may be to come. This moment, as Peter said, the Taliban knows they need to get this right. They want to get the U.S. out. They want to have the world kind of sort of have a sigh of relief and sort of a transition of power. They want to be vaguely accepted. But in the mid to long term, the expectation from most people on the ground is that absolutely they will begin to implement their draconian version of Sharia law. And I should just say that was always understood, despite the best efforts of the Taliban to sort of rebrand themselves as a more moderate political force. I don't think anyone who was participating in the peace talks is naive enough to imagine that they were going to somehow become progressive, okay? It was always, I think, understood that they would probably resort to this kind of behavior.
All right, Clarissa, stand by. Everyone stand by. I want to bring in Republican Congressman Peter Meijer of Michigan, a member of the Foreign Relations Committee. And Congressman, thanks for joining us. I know you served in Iraq. You later worked in Afghanistan for an NGO based in Kandahar. You know the challenges there, but do you accept the argument from President Biden that this wasn't a failure, this withdrawal, that the chaos we're seeing now was simply the price the U.S. had to pay in order to withdraw after 20 years of warfare there?
I don't accept it. There certainly was never going to be a positive outcome, but we could have prevented it becoming this nightmare scenario. The thing that we really missed was in the mid to late July and in early August, the degree of local level negotiations, regional level negotiations between power brokers, between warlords and their Taliban companions. Everyone was looking for their own skin, and as a result, that moved up, accelerated greatly the Taliban takeover, and led to us being completely overwhelmed by the timeline.
And you've heard the breaking news, President Biden now hinting that the U.S. Could stay in Afghanistan with military force longer than the August 31st deadline. If Americans still need to be evacuated, should U.S. troops stay on the ground until every American is evacuated?
Absolutely. I think I've been long troubled by this August 31st deadline over the past several days. It's 12 days away. We still have thousands of Americans and tens of thousands of loyal Afghan allies we haven't gotten to. And if we leave, we abandon them, we lose all control, and the situation could spiral even worse. After
nearly 2 decades of war, did you ever think, Congressman, you'd see a situation where the United States would be forced to rely on the Taliban to try and evacuate people from the country?
If you would have said this was happening or where we are today, if you would have said that a month ago, you wouldn't have been believed. But we had dozens of members of Congress, a bipartisan group, urging the Biden administration going back to April to speed up the special immigrant visa process. They failed to heed our calls. They said the nightmare scenario wouldn't come to pass. And it's so incredibly disappointing that we saw that over the weekend, what we had all feared. We had time, we lost months, and this is here we go.
Thanks for your service once again, Congressman. And thanks for joining us, Congressman Peter Meijer. Appreciate it very much. Thank you. And we're going to stay on top of what's going on in Afghanistan, but there's also other breaking news. We're following President Biden speaking out about his administration's new recommendation that vaccinated adults could receive a COVID booster shot and receive it soon. We have details of who should get one and when. Lots of news when we come back.
Angie's List is now Angie, your home for everything home. Angie still has the same top pros and reviews you've counted on for more than 20 years. Only now you'll get access to all the tools you need to make your home your happy place. Inside, outside, big or small, Angie helps you find the right solution for whatever you need done, all from your phone. It's simple to find upfront pricing and instantly book hundreds of projects. You can even search pricing guides to see what others paid for similar jobs, and easily compare quotes from top local pros to make sure you're getting a fair price. From lawn care to repairing the AC to the project of your dreams, Angie has your home projects handled from start to finish. Plus, when you book and pay through Angie, they'll cover your project up to the full purchase price, plus limited damage protection with their happiness guarantee. Make your home an Angie home. Check out Angie.com today. And for more on the happiness guarantee, go to Angie.com/happiness-guarantee.htm.
It's summer, which means that millions of people are on the roads, heading to and from vacation. Seeing that check engine light come on can cause major anxiety. It's never a good feeling, especially if your car's no longer covered under a warranty. And if your car is out of warranty, that light can signal expensive car repairs. This is where CarShield comes in. CarShield picks up where your warranty left off, offering vehicle service plans that can cover expensive repairs, like your engine, transmission, and AC, which could save you thousands of dollars. Here's how it works. When your car needs repairs, use your favorite mechanic or dealership, and CarShield pays them directly. That's it. It's not just a protection plan, it's peace of mind. Get a free quote by calling 800-416-6522 or visit carshield.com. That's 800-416-6522 or carshield.com to get your free quote.
We're following the truly chaotic situation unfolding right now in Afghanistan and President Biden's defiant defense of the U.S. withdrawal as thousands of Americans remain stranded in that country right now. There's also breaking pandemic news that we're following. President Biden saying just a little while ago that the booster shots are the best way to protect Americans from the COVID-19 Delta variant. This comes just hours after his administration announced that people will be eligible for a third vaccine dose starting next month based on when they receive their second dose. CNN national correspondent Athena Jones has the very latest.
The time to lay out a plan for COVID-19 boosters is now.
With new COVID cases and hospitalizations surging to where they were in November, before the first vaccinations began, the White House announced plans for a broad rollout of vaccine booster shots next month. Starting September 20th, the administration recommending vaccinated adults receive a booster 8 months after their second dose of the Pfizer or Moderna vaccines, presenting data suggesting waning immunity over time.
This will boost your immune response. It will increase your protection from COVID-19. It's the best way to protect ourselves from new variants that could arise.
Booster doses still must be approved by the FDA, which is still reviewing the data. But experts warn
boosters is not going to end this pandemic. What's going to end this pandemic is finding a way to motivate the 30-40% of people in this country who haven't gotten any vaccines yet.
It's the unvaccinated that have hospitals around the country stressed. In the 5 hardest hit states, intensive care units are more than 90% full. Alabama reporting it is out of ICU beds.
It's really just a domino effect that then clogs up our ERs, clogs up everything else.
With more than 121,000 new child COVID cases reported in the U.S. last week, Texas and Florida lead the nation in new pediatric cases, while in Mississippi, a 13-year-old died just one day after testing positive for COVID.
I thought it was sad because the child had went to the hospital, but they sent her home that same evening. Knowing she was sick, they should have sent her to a hospital to get her some help.
But the debate over masking in schools rages on. Schools in Broward County, Florida, instituting mask mandates as students return to class today in defiance of Governor Ron DeSantis. The state board of education.
Okay. I guess I'm parking here. I can't fucking see anything. There you go. Weird.